It's finally here, folks. It is game day. Notre Dame will take on Penn State later tonight, and the winner advances to the national championship. But before we get to the game, we got some big news on the injury front that is going to have a huge impact on this game. We're going to talk about that, plus a whole lot more on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And happy game day. Today is Thursday, January 9th. And thanks for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. Quick reminder to subscribe on your preferred platform. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Win or lose, just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, this is not necessarily a preview show because I already did that. I released that on Tuesday. And it's not even really a crossover episode with someone on the Penn State side because I did that yesterday. Today, with the game coming up later tonight, this isn't going to be like a full-length show. Going to keep this a little bit short, but considering the game isn't until later tonight, and I imagine a lot of you are going to be at work today, I wanted to give you something to get you through the day, because if you're like me, these are going to be some anxious hours leading up to 7:30 p.m. Eastern tonight when Notre Dame takes on Penn State in the Orange Bowl, and I cannot wait. And I've got some more thoughts about this game that I wanted to share with you before kickoff. But before we get to that, I did want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who reached out to me, everyone who DM'd me over the past couple days, because if you're not familiar, I live out here in Los Angeles, Southern California, and if you have not watched the news, there are wildfires raging all over the Southern California area, and honestly, the fires are very close to my apartment. I can see them from the rooftop of my building. I've been watching them these past couple of days. I've been able to see the destruction firsthand, and it has been just harrowing. It's been depressing. I know a couple people whose families' homes were burned down. Fortunately, I've been okay. I haven't had to evacuate or anything like that. A lot of my friends, if people are close to me out here, they have not had to move. So that's great. I feel very fortunate to be in this position, but I do really appreciate everyone who's reached out. Things are okay for me, and send your thoughts and prayers to everyone who cannot say the same, because it is just a really sad time out here, and there's so many people who need help. And I just also want to give a ton of credit to the firefighters who have been working endlessly, because I believe this fire started on like Tuesday morning, and they've been working around the clock ever since then to try to put an end to this. But it's pretty hard to do when there's 80 to 100 mile an hour winds. So just want to say thank you. But now let's try to redirect our attention to the actual game that's coming up later tonight. And I feel more confident now than I did before. I'm not really sure why that is, because typically I'm like the opposite. I'm going through a roller coaster of emotions going into the game, and then in the lead up, I'm like extremely nervous. But I guess right now I feel very calm about this game, and I have had my concerns about Notre Dame's rest, and does Penn State have the advantage? We're going to talk about that a little bit more today, but there was some key news that came out on the injury front in the press conference yesterday. Marcus Freeman said that Jeremiyah, Notre Dame's star running back, is ready to go. We're going to see just how effective he can actually be in the game. There's been some different reports out there. I've seen and heard some people say that he's like close to 100%. Personally, I find that really hard to believe, because this is the same guy who was practicing in a brace just a few days ago and looked really uncomfortable when he was doing that. So I'm not of the belief that he's going to be anywhere near 100%, but if he could provide anything for this Notre Dame offense, that is a huge benefit for them. I mean, just think about that Indiana game. This guy broke off a 98-yard touchdown run, and he said even after the game, he was like 75% because he was dealing with the flu the day before, plus the same knee injury that he's dealing with now. He just tweaked it during the Georgia game. So if that's 75% Jeremiyah, and he's still capable of doing that, then I will gladly take that tonight when Notre Dame takes on Penn State. So very encouraging news. We're going to see how effective Jeremiyah is going to be, but if he can provide anything for this Notre Dame offense, it's a big benefit, because then you get a fresh Shadarian Price and Aeneas Williams in those third down packages where he's in there for pass protection, and then he can run some routes out of the backfield. Like, you want Notre Dame's stable of running backs at full go in this game, because on the other side, Penn State's running backs, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, are prepared to have a big game. We also got some news on the Penn State side. Their star linebacker, Abdul, is considered a game-time decision, according to Penn State head coach James Franklin. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really know what to make of that. because he has been playing it really close to the vest all week long about Carter's availability. He didn't practice, at least not in front of the media, twice this week. And earlier this week, he said that Carter, there's nothing stopping him from playing, but they're just going to see how he progresses. And then you've got Carter on social media who's been posting all these weird, cryptic Star Wars videos. And look, I have not seen one Star Wars movie, which I admit is kind of insane. I haven't seen like 1 second of one movie other than like the Luke, I am your father thing. But I don't really know any of these references, but I have been told that he's basically insinuating that he's been in like a hyperbaric chamber all week, getting ready to go and try to give it a shot against the Irish in this game. But my sense there is that he is going to play, but I don't expect him to be anywhere near his full health, his full effectiveness. So is it going to be more? Is it going to be less than Jeremiyah Love? There's really no way of knowing up until the actual game starts. But either way, if Abdul Carter is out there, I want Notre Dame to run right at him on the first play because he's dealing with an upper body injury. We think it's a shoulder. They have not really been very specific about what the actual injury is. And I mean, I get it. He's your star player. You're going to want to keep that as vague as humanly possible to try to prevent the opponent from getting any sort of advantage. And if they try to target that specific body part to make it hurt, like you're going to try to avoid that if you can. But based on what we saw from Carter on the sideline in that Boise State game when he left, and I think it was in the first quarter, it looks like a shoulder injury. So I want Notre Dame to run counter, bring in a pulling guard going full speed right at him and hit him high in the shoulder to see if he's able to withstand that. And look, I don't think that's dirty. That's just football. If you step out on the field, you are accepting what comes with that, and Notre Dame should be physical with him from the opening snap. If he's able to handle that and he can still go, then credit to him for playing through pain. But if he's not, then he's going to take himself out of the game, or the coaches are going to take him out of the game because he's just not nearly as effective as he would be if he were fully healthy. I honestly think that Notre Dame is in a better position to replace Jeremiyah Love than Penn State is to replace Abdul Carter, because we've seen what Jadarian Price can do, and we've honestly seen what Aeneas Williams can do in his amount of action so far, especially in the second half of the season. So I feel very good about that, and I do believe that Penn State is a very competent backup for Abdul Carter, but it's just not the same. Like, Carter can spy Riley Leonard, he can get in the backfield, he can beat double teams, he can make plays in the run game. Like, he is just everywhere on the field, and there's no way you can replace a player like that. And even though you can't replace the speed and the potential for a big play quite like Jeremiyah Love, Notre Dame still has a really good option in Jadarian Price, because he has shown he is very explosive as well. So arguably the two biggest players in this game, both coming into it with injury questions. And based on the press conference, it looks like Jeremiyah Love is a little bit more ready to go than Abdul Carter, but that's all talk. We're going to find out later tonight when these two teams take the field. All right, coming up, Marcus Freeman and James Franklin had an interesting interaction during the Orange Bowl press conference. Is there any tension there? And what impact could that have on this game? More on that right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So the coaching matchup going into this game has been a big talking point, right? Because James Franklin has been around. He did a great job turning around Vanderbilt, and then he left to take on the job at Penn State, and he has built Penn State into a consistent contender. But we know the one thing that's been holding him back, his record in the big games. 3-19 against top 10 teams, 1-14 against top 5 teams. He just has not been able to get over the hump. Meanwhile, you've got Marcus Freeman, who's only in his third year as a head coach, and after 2 up and down years, good wins, bad losses, he started off year 3 with a great win and then a bad loss, and no one really knew what to make of Marcus Freeman on the outside. He has totally turned the season around. He's had his team ready to go each and every single week. They're on a 13-game winning streak. 12-game winning streak, 11 of which of those wins came by double digits. So things are rolling. He got a contract extension, well-deserved. So everything is going well for Marcus Freeman right now. They just beat Georgia. He beat the best coach in college football in Kirby Smart. So now you have the young up-and-coming coach going up against James Franklin, who I wouldn't say he's up and coming, but he still has not reached the pinnacle. He does not have a win quite to the extent that Marcus Freeman already has in his third year. So they were at the Orange Bowl press conference, and I understand that coaches don't really want to be there at these press conferences anyway. They had to do it last week before the Sugar Bowl. They have to do this all the time as the head coach of these big programs. And James Franklin likes to talk. He likes to talk a lot, and he did in this press conference, and you could tell Marcus Freeman, who is always really friendly with the media, he was a little bit short in his responses today, and he even said that Notre Dame is going to continue to prepare up until the very last second before this game, because this is a very quick turnaround for them, because even though it's the same amount of time in between one game and a regular season, there's just so much more responsibility when it's the postseason. You have more media obligations. You got the travel. There's just a lot more that goes into it in a college football playoff game compared to the regular season. So he was pretty candid when he said that Notre Dame does not have the same amount of time to prepare for this one. Meanwhile, we know Penn State has 2 extra days to rest up. Now, they didn't know who they were playing, obviously, right? It could have been Georgia or Notre Dame, but they did have a little bit more time to do some advanced scouting. So in this press conference, Marcus Freeman was a little bit more short in his responses than normal. I think he just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. James Franklin was on the complete other side of that. He had a whole lot to say. He was talking about Notre Dame's independence, and he said, with Marcus Freeman sitting there right next to him, that he thinks everyone should be in a conference champion, or should be in a conference, and that everyone should either play for a conference championship game or they shouldn't play for a conference championship game. And he was going on this long rant about how everything should be equal. And then the question was posed to Marcus Freeman. He was like, yeah, I like where we're at. And he was pretty brief in his response. And then James Franklin tried to get the last word again and then went on and on and on. And this is really what James Franklin does. He talks about, the conferences, and he said before that Notre Dame should be independent, which is pretty ironic because Penn State was an independent before they joined the Big Ten back in like the early 90s. So Penn State tried to do it, man. They tried to be an independent school just like Notre Dame did, but guess what? It didn't work out for them. They weren't able to generate all the resources they needed without conference affiliation. Meanwhile, Notre Dame does. They have their own television partner, and they've had one for 30 plus years in NBC. They've got Under Armour. They've got all these things going for them that allow them to remain independent. I do think that there's a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of bitterness on that side, specifically from Penn State, because obviously like every other fan is going to make the argument like, yeah, Notre Dame should join a conference, and then you ask them why, and then they have like the worst reasons ever why they should actually do it. And it's like, the ultimate like self-own. It's nothing tells me that you don't know ball, you don't know what you're talking about when you try to say that Notre Dame needs to be in a conference. Then I can just listen to your reasons why, and way more often than not, they're terrible. So I'm like, okay, I don't really have to respect your college football opinion. That's fine. We can go on with our lives. But it's funny that James Franklin keeps bringing it up. So that happened. That was a little bit of a weird interaction, right? And then it keeps going. And then James Franklin made a comment about Marcus Freeman's hairline. And he said, like, how old are you? Kind of talking about how young he was. And it wasn't like directly mean, but it kind of felt like James Franklin was trying to sun Marcus Freeman. And he's a talker. That's kind of his vibe. That's how he rolls. But Marcus Freeman was very quiet, but you could kind of see in his body language. He was like looking over at James Franklin a little bit more. And I could just sense some tension on the Marcus Freeman side. And for as charismatic and as, buttoned up as Marcus Freeman can be, we know there's an edge to him. This guy played middle linebacker for Ohio State. This dude is a dog, and we've seen it. We saw him when he's coming out of the tunnel, going up against Texas A&M. He was screaming. He was mother effing everyone in the crowd. He was like, let's go, bring it on, bring on that crowd noise. We saw him get after it with players this year. I think he was yelling at Sam Pendleton one time on the sidelines, although I actually didn't like that because I thought Pendleton got unsportsmanlike for basically retaliating against Florida State when he was just defending his guy. But he also really laid into Adon Schuler in like one of the early games of the season, and that was right because Adon Schuler had just a terrible unsportsmanlike penalty, and he really laid into his players, and we know how aggressive he likes to be in practice, so we know that that all exists within him. And I think that there's a fire burning inside Marcus Freeman now, even more than there was before, because obviously he's going to be ready to go for a college football playoff game. But I really think James Franklin made a big mistake in the way that he handled that press conference, because another thing we had heard in the press conference is Riley Leonard went on about how Marcus Freeman is an extension of the team, of the guys in the locker room. They follow his command, and he brings the energy and the juice every single day. Well, I think now he took that as a slight. I don't know if there's one specific thing that Franklin said, but go back and watch it. Unfortunately, I can't play it out for you, or else then I'd get copyright infringement, and I'd have to deal with that debacle. So I can't do that for you today. But I encourage you to go back and watch it, specifically watch it, because then you can really see Marcus Freeman's body language. Because if you listen to it, there's really nothing in there that's going to indicate that Marcus Freeman is actually upset with James Franklin. But it's something I noticed, and it's going to be something that I continue to monitor during the pregame portion of this game and even after. Because we saw that awkward interaction between Curt Cignetti and Marcus Freeman. We might see something similar to that later tonight, depending on how this game goes. But I'm telling you guys, if this team wasn't ready to go before, if they weren't all the way fired up, I think that James Franklin, in the way that he handled that press conference, he might have just done something a little bit too much. He might have crossed a little bit of a line, and Marcus Freeman's not going to do anything publicly, but he's going to bring that anger, bring that intensity, and bring it to his team and let them take it out on Penn State on the field, and that's how it should be. But keep an eye out for that later tonight, something to watch for. All right, before we go, I've got a few more things I want to touch on, including what Notre Dame has to do in order to beat Penn State. That's coming up next on Locked On Irish. Okay, so in my preview show that I did a couple days ago, I talked about my keys to the game for Notre Dame on offense and defense, and I don't need to rehash that whole thing. If you haven't listened to that show, if you haven't watched that show, go back and watch it when you're done with this, because you need all the content you can get, right, to get you to game day, to make time go by quicker, because 7:30 p.m. Eastern cannot go by soon enough. But something else I wanted to touch on, and this has a lot to do with the rest and what these teams have been dealing with in the lead up to this game. The start of the game is going to tell us a lot. It's not going to be like, oh, whoever starts fast is going to win that game. I don't think that's how it's going to go. But I think Penn State is going to come out. I think they're going to be really aggressive. Does that mean they're going to score a bunch of points early on? Not necessarily, but I think they're going to try to push the ball downfield. They're going to try to make some big plays. I wouldn't be surprised if Kotelnicki tried to run a trick play on the first or second drive. That's what Penn State is kind of known for with Kotelnicki as the offensive coordinator, some real creativity on that side of the ball. I think we're going to see it early because Penn State is going to try to get out in front. That is not something that they have been able to do a lot this season. They did start out hot against Ohio State. They jumped out to a 10-0 lead, but their touchdown was on a pick six. It wasn't like their offense came out clicking right away. Meanwhile, Notre Dame has been able to start out hot for most of the season. Sometimes the defense has given up a touchdown on the first drive, but then they've really tightened it up, and then they figure it out after that. So we're going to see how these two teams start. But Notre Dame has won pretty consistently this season by starting out fast and then just suffocating their opponent the rest of the way. They haven't had to mount a comeback in the second half, really. Even in Texas A&M, that game was still in jeopardy in the second half, but they had the Jadarian Price touchdown, and then they gave up a touchdown, so it was tied again, and then Notre Dame scored. They have really not had to come back late. I think they might have to in this game. I made that prediction in the preview podcast earlier this week, but if they don't, if they come out hot again and they take the early lead on Penn State, I think they are going to be in the driver's seat to win this game, because in this situation, they're going to be able to pin their ears back a little bit more and get after Drew Aller. And Drew Aller, for his career, has not performed well under pressure. His completion percentage has plummeted against the best teams he's played. I talked about that yesterday in the crossover episode, how his completion percentage going up against Ohio State, Oregon, Boise State, and SMU, two teams who don't really, their defenses aren't considered one of the best in the country. He did not play that well against those teams. I thought he played in moments great against Oregon, but for the full game, it wasn't as great. He had 2 interceptions in that game as well. So if Notre Dame starts out fast and they do this again, if they really come out, they start fast, and then they suffocate Penn State in the second half, they run the ball just like they did against Georgia and just like Ohio State did to Penn State, then there's really no debating the formula or discussing what is Notre Dame going to have to do if they have to pass, because it might not ever matter. Because as I said in the preview with Zach Sakos yesterday at Penn State, he was like, well, what happens if a team forces Notre Dame to pass in the second half? I don't know what's going to happen. I think they're going to try to feed the ball to Jordan Faison or Mitchell Evans, but we just haven't had to see it. And now you've got Notre Dame, and yeah, there was a real physical, mental toll that happened by playing Georgia just a week ago. But if they come out and start fast and they're just still ready to go, and maybe they're still a little bit fired up because Marcus Freeman got them fired up because of that interaction with James Franklin yesterday, this could be a special season and maybe one of the longest runs of not very stressful games that we have seen Notre Dame play in a long time, right? If they end up beating Penn State by double digits, like that is the path that we have seen in every single win for Notre Dame since that loss in Northern Illinois. Are they going to be able to replicate it again? I have my doubts. Like I said, I think they're going to have to come back. But if they do it again, then I don't know what more you could say about this team and their preparation in the week leading up to it. Because if they come out, they start out hot, they don't get tired, and they wear Penn State down again, just 1 week after doing it to Georgia, and just over like 10 days from doing it to Indiana, who, despite the fact that they probably weren't as good as their record said they were, they still had a very good defense, and they wore them down too. Like, there's nothing more you could say about how this coaching staff prepares this team, and it's something I'm looking out for. But I still think they're going to have to come back at some point in this game because I just think that they're due for one of those games. That doesn't mean they aren't capable of coming back. I picked them to win 24-20, but their best path is obviously if they get out to a hot start and then they pressure Drew Aller and then they figure out some things from there on offense. But speaking of that offense, they got to be a little bit more aggressive in this game. I don't really think you can just ground and pound your whole way to a victory against Penn State because you can't really count on getting a kickoff return for a touchdown or a fumble recovery in their territory every single game. I think they're going to create some turnovers because that is what Notre Dame has done in every game this season. They're going to come up with some big plays. They're going to try some exotic stuff on special teams. We know that's part of the game plan. But I think in terms of scoring points, you have to be a little bit more aggressive on offense. You have to hit on some chunk plays, and they've got the guys to do it. Jordan Faison had a big chunk play against Indiana. Unfortunately, didn't score a touchdown. They were getting really creative with how they could get him the ball against Georgia. So I think he's going to have his opportunities. If Love can go, he's certainly going to have a shot. If he can't, Jadarian Price is going to have even more opportunities to break a big play. Hell, Aeneas Williams even had a 50-plus yard touchdown run against Army, so he's capable. And then for the wide receivers, like, I don't expect anyone other than Jordan Faison to come out in this game and get 100 yards. But it doesn't matter. They just need one or two big plays. So I'm adding a new prediction that I didn't include in my game preview. I think Chris Mitchell is going to have a big play in this game because I called the Georgia game the transfer game because it felt like every single guy that Notre Dame brought in the transfer portal this past offseason had a huge moment in that Georgia game. Everyone except one. And that's wide receiver Chris Mitchell, the transfer from Florida International. He has big playability. He's a deep threat. We saw it in the spring game. And they've tried it a few times to him this year. It didn't work out, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. He barely played against Georgia. He played 12 snaps. But I think teams are starting to sleep on him. And I think he's going to have an opportunity going up against Penn State to have a big play. If he has one catch for 35 yards and a touchdown, you know what? He did it. Mission accomplished. I'm glad that we brought in Chris Mitchell to play for this team because that is what he was brought in to do, catch the deep ball. It hasn't worked out this season, but if he can just do it one time, that would be great. Bo Collins had a signature moment against Georgia. It's all he needed. One touchdown. Jane Greathouse has had a pretty disappointing year to some of us on the outside who had really high hopes for him. He's still a productive player, good wide receiver. I think he has a bright future. If he has a big touchdown in this game, huge for him, right? Like Notre Dame just needs one or two guys on the outside to step up and make some plays in this game because I think Mitchell Evans is going to have a big game. You could kind of tell from his press conference that he's been, a little annoyed with how much we talk about Tyler Warren. And you know what? For good reason. That dude is an absolute stud, and it's going to be difficult for Notre Dame to cover him. Penn State likes to get him the ball in a bunch of different situations, and it is going to be a big problem for the Notre Dame defense. But Mitchell Evans is looking over there like, man, I haven't really had the season that I wanted. Now is the time to make up for that. He had a good game against USC. Can he replicate that against Penn State? If he does, Notre Dame's offense is going to be in great shape because then they have to account for Mitchell Evans more in the middle of the field. He's a great safety net on third downs, and it just opens up a lot for this offense. Mike Denbrock even joked about setting offensive football back like 80 years because they only had 90 passing yards against Georgia. And it's like, you know what? You got the win. Who cares? Well, they're going to need to do a little bit more than that this week, and I think they're going to use a bunch of different guys to make it happen. Notre Dame has been aggressive all year as a team, not necessarily on offense, but I do think we're going to see a more aggressive offense in this game. If they get up early and they suffocate this Penn State defense and they just really swarm them all game long when Notre Dame is on the defensive side of the ball, then Notre Dame is in a great spot to win this game. I still like the Irish to win 24-20. I'm not backing off my score prediction, but I do feel a little bit more ease about this game than I did before. Hey, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but But I was glad to be able to do this with you today. Like I said, just had a little bit more thoughts. Wanted to talk to you about this game, but that's going to do it for this episode. I'm going to be back later tonight doing the post-game reaction show with Joe George. He handles the Locked On Irish postcast. I think Brian Smith, who's been on the show a bunch of times, I think he's going to be on it as well. We're going to be live like 15 minutes after the game ends. It's going to go like 45 minutes to an hour. So be on the lookout for that. Also, if you're watching along on YouTube, just hit that little bell button so that way you get an alert once the show is live, and then you can tune in immediately. Also, remember, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, and like this video, rate the podcast 5 stars, leave a review, all that good stuff. I am very grateful for all the support on this show, especially in this playoff run. It's been a lot of fun, but all season long, this has been such a fun ride. I don't want it to end anytime soon, so hopefully the Irish get the dub tonight, and then we could be talking about a national championship. Enjoy the game tonight. I'll see you soon. Go Irish.